Good evening, good afternoon, class. Welcome to our Wednesday, our only Wednesday meeting time. We are excited about our students, community members in law enforcement, and everyone's a student, including Dr. Trader and myself, joining us for this particular discussion and presentation where we are attending virtually the National Association of Public Defense Conference, which is being held in Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama. I was supposed to be physically there sharing, so I knew I couldn't meet in class Tuesday either way, but the session that they had me presenting for is today at 4:20 or so. The persons for that particular conference will be joining us. So I just wanted you guys to prepare to see and welcome some guests. We'll be sharing a little detail about our Policing Inside Out class. And we expect you to be fully present and taking notes and engaging with the guests based upon the presentations you'll see today. The presentations will be based upon the book, Why the Police Should Be Trained by Black People. Dr. Sharon Jones Eversley is a faculty at Towson University. She co-authored a chapter with the executive director of the National Association of Public Defense, Lori James Towns, who is in Alabama as well, along with Dr. Sharon. So you'll be able to kind of be enlightened about some of the work we've done. And you already know Dr. Roden Trader is a author along with Dr. Muhammad in the book as well. So of course, we'll be chiming in that regard. What I'm about to do at this present time, though, is housekeeping matters. On Tuesday, November 8th, as a reminder, we will be at the Police Training Center at the University of Baltimore. So over the course of the past 2 or 3 reflections, I've been asking students to confirm their attendance. I've shared with Morgan students, you all have the option to take the shuttle down to UB because it drops off at HH Midtown, and that's like a block south of University of Baltimore. So all Morgan students have transportation to get to University of Baltimore. We'll just do a double check on that after the presentation today. The next thing is important for us to confirm and finalize, and that is on Tuesday, November the 15th, we as a class are going to the African American Museum of History and Culture in Washington, D.C. As you've been alerted, we'll be meeting and departing from Coppin State University at 8:00 a.m. And again, this is on Tuesday, November 15th. So that's less than 2 weeks from today. So it's like not a Wednesday, but it's a Tuesday, November 15th. And we need to confirm attendees. We need to just have absolute confirmation on attendees. Everyone has been invited. We actually have a bus. This is coach transportation to the museum. This is, in addition to all the things we've done, this is a impactful, memorable moment for Policing Inside Out. So we do expect and hope that as many of us can come, will be in attendance. It's an all-day event, again, departing at 8 a.m., returning by 5 p.m. Tuesday, November 15th. So Dr. Trader, if you want to chime in to just reinforce what I've said, and then in a few moments, we'll be welcoming our guests from the conference.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pratt Harris. Pleasant good afternoon, class. It is very important for us to get an actual head count so that we can accurately plan for the bus. We need to know tonight, how many of you are planning to attend this trip? And meaning you do not foresee having any obstacles like your class. Maybe you've already spoken to your professors. You don't see any obstacles relative to work or childcare, and you will be able to travel with us for the day. If you are uncertain right now, I suggest that you hold off on saying that you will attend. Perhaps you can share with us next week, and we can then let you know what kind of space we have. But this trip is very popular, and I have some other persons within Coppin State University, within my department in particular, who have interest in this trip. And if the opportunity is there for students who actually want to go and will show up to go to attend, I want to extend that to them as well. I do not want to have spend so much money on a coach bus and have an empty bus go down to Washington, D.C. So I'm asking you perhaps to write in the chat right now so that we can get an on-the-spot estimation of how many students currently in the class plan to attend the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the trip on November 15th, which is an all-day trip. So if you can type that in the chat now, we'd appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Once we get that information, we'll be submitting permission slips for attendees and also the instructions for the day in terms of, an agenda of what we plan to do, giving you highlights about the museum and the various exhibits that we recommend. Dr. Pratt Harris, nor I will be serving as docents. The museum has several docents who will be able to assist you and answer your questions. But pretty much you'll be walking around with a map, and you can use the hints and tips that we've given you. For example, Dr. Pratt Harris likes to start at the Reconstruction era. That is her choice, but we'll have that on as a highlight of a place that you need to start. We definitely want you to see the Emmett Till exhibit, the Sandra Bland exhibit. These are all areas that are aligned with our class. So please, are they typing in the chat, Dr. Pratt Harris? I'm on my phone, so I can't really tell. But if you would right now, my Coppin students. Okay, I see Ms. Perot just entered the room, so wonderful.
Okay, so they are typing in the chat, and we can record what they've shared regarding attendance. I did type in there myself that each year I bring my youngest daughter. This is an educational opportunity for her. If anyone has such a need, I know Dr. Trader mentioned childcare, please let us know that as well.
Hello, good evening. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so where will the bus be parking so I will know where to park my car?
Yes, so, we do have to make those arrangements regarding not getting a ticket on campus campus.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
We'll
or should I just Uber to the bus? That's what I was trying to think.
No, Dr. Trader, we can talk about that offline after.
I'm back. Somebody, but I don't know how I bought myself out, whatever. Miss Perot, did your vibe just knock me out? I was welcoming you, and then all of a sudden I was out. But anyway.
Yeah, Ms. Footman was asking a question about parking. So in the past, we were able to park in the parking lot.
Yes.
And
in
then
the past, based on the number of persons who have said, yes, they're coming and they will need parking, I will request parking from our transportation and parking services. I don't want anybody coming off that bus at 5 p.m. and not having their vehicle there. So yes, I will be requesting parking. So that's not something you need to be concerned about if you have an interest. Thank you.
Okay, yes. That's the only thing I was just worried about. I just don't want to get towed. But thank you. Yes, I'll just park in. Will you just guys tell me which parking lot to park in?
Yeah, so this is the same
I'll
place.
Just go from there.
This has been the same place where the class is held. I'm not sure if you've been on Coppin's campus.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I've only just been to Morgan's.
Okay, got you. So yes, it will be same location, but if you look at, we'll give you the instructions. If you look at the previous instructions on coming to Coppin, it's also embedded in the instructions for Coppin.
Parking lot C, but all of that, we will send out detailed information. Right now, we just need to know how many people so that we can adjust ourselves accordingly to ensure that this one coach bus will be carrying us to and fro with safety.
Exactly.
So, persons typed in the chat, Dr. Pratt Harris?
Yep, I see a few said they can and a few said they cannot.
Okay, and I appreciate those who've said they cannot. Thank you so much.
Yes, and the other piece is we are reminding all of the persons in this class that we do collect the weekly reflection. So what I did notice is that the reflection that was due today by you still have a few. Did I say? No, I said 3:59. The reflection that was due by 3:59 p.m. today, we would have been able to confirm in totality what this is looking like regarding persons' attendance if everyone submitted the reflection. So on that reflection, there's a question about attending this particular field trip, as well as reminder of November the 8th at the Police Training Center. So we will want to continue to turn in our reflections. Our students recently got midterm grades that were a reflection of their submission of the reflections. So we want you to remember that the class is based on attending class, and there's no obstacle relative to attend. There has been no obstacle relative to attending class because because we do recognize this is an in-person class. But if, for example, you are a Morgan student and you could not get to Coppin, you actually have the opportunity to attend on Zoom. If you're a Coppin student and you could not make it to Morgan, you have the opportunity to attend via Zoom. So we have had no attendance obstacles unless they were something that beyond anyone's control regarding attendance. And so attendance and then the submission of the reflection is how you were graded for the midterm. If any student at Coppin has any questions, obviously you would talk to Dr. Roden Trader. And for my students at Morgan State University, I've asked you all to meet with me during my office hours if you had any questions about where we are, what your standing is at this point of the semester.
And if I might, Dr. Pratt-Harris, I adhere to the same policies and procedures in terms of the midterm grades that I also submitted. They were based on attendance and reflection submissions.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I'm hoping we are all on the same page regarding that. We know that today we're meeting on a Wednesday, which is not the scheduled time for the class. But again, as a reminder, I think we're actually about to let some folks in from, Jeff Scher. I don't recognize that name as one of our students. I'll just hold off on any new names until 4:20. I'm not sure what I was saying.
I'm not sure what you were saying either. We were
I was
talking
about to say something.
Class logistics about Wednesday, the fact that
it's a Wednesday. This is a Wednesday. So we recognize that it's a Wednesday. It's not the normal time, obviously, that we meet, but we are scheduled for a presentation for this conference. And that's why we had to do Wednesday the 2nd for this particular moment. Students who could not be here made that clear. And we actually sent out reflections that asked you to confirm your attendance. I've also communicated with students who will be coming in a little later because they have a class that runs into this beginning portion of our meeting today. So the expectation, this is for those who are not here. This is preaching to the choir because you guys are here. The expectation is if you were not here, there was some kind of confirmation about attendance. And again, just as a reminder, next Tuesday, November the 8th, we will be at the Police Training Center at the University of Baltimore. Again, Morgan students have shuttled from the campus to HH Midtown, which is 1 block south of the University of Baltimore. And I posted all that information for the Morgan students, the schedule and all.
The people who is driving, where could we park at?
University of Baltimore?
Yeah.
Okay, so you would possibly park, there's like 2-hour parking or up to 4-hour parking, depends upon where you are in the neighborhood, which doesn't require a permit. Personally, I'll probably be doing the same thing, trying to find that kind of parking. But if I was a student, I know I would jump on the shuttle. If I was, going back and forth to keep, if I'm on campus, I would get on the shuttle and I have to worry about driving my car.
And also we're meeting at 5:30 at the building?
Yes. And the instructions will be sent out again, and those are also included in previous announcements, including the most recent and several prior reflections where the information regarding UB is included. So make certain that you're reading the announcements, that you're completing the reflections, and that you're taking the notes in class, because we kind of go over this each time. Again, our guests from the National Association of Public Defense Conference will be joining us in about 30 seconds. I'll be starting to let some folks in. The presentation on for this particular session will begin at 4:30 p.m. It is actually, they're an hour behind us, just like folks in Jamaica. They're an hour behind us. And at 5:30, we'll conclude the presentations. Our Policing Inside Out students will continue We'll go over some things that we're engaging in during the presentations. We will confirm that we have a reflection that will be due by next Tuesday at 5:29 p.m. That's when it's due. And then we'll wrap up class by 6 p.m. And Lola has a question.
Is the shuttle bringing us back?
Yep, the shuttle will take you to University of Baltimore, just south of the campus, because it goes to HH Midtown. HH Midtown is housing. It's like housing for Morgan students. So it travels until like 2 o'clock in the morning, back and forth between Morgan and HH Midtown. Okay, I'm going to start letting some folks in. I'm not sure. I don't know if Jeff Scher is a guest or if he's one of our, I don't recognize the name. So I just let that person in. Any comments about our class last week? We had a jam-packed class. We had 2 panels. They were kind of looking at some of the topics we've discussed from different lenses. I'm sure those of us who took the time to do the reflections were able to kind of ponder that experience. Jeff Scher, I just welcomed you to the class. I'm not sure, Jeff Scher, are you at NAPD or a Morgan or Coppin person? I can't remember.
I'm with NAPD and we're.
Oh, great. Oh, that's right. I know the name. I invited you personally.
That's all right.
It just dawned on me. So
Sharon's
welcome.
coming over so you can touch base about how this is going to work on our end.
Excellent. So yes, so those who are attending the National Association of Public Defense Conference can in fact obviously join us using that link. And again, we open up the doors for everyone at 4:20 p.m. And the presentation will begin officially at 4:30 p.m. And right now, just to let you both know, there's a light shining on you, so we can't quite see you. So I'm not sure if you can turn to the light the light shining behind you, so you can turn for the light to shine on you. I'm not sure if that's possible.
So we're in a convention center and we have you up on a big screen.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so
our local host for this.
Wow, is there any way for us to see the folks in the room?
That's kind of what's here, but the problem is the lighting on the stage, so we can see Sharon make.
Oh, yeah, I can't see you all much at all. And Dr. Rodentrader is here.
So what is it?
Welcome, welcome.
Hello, everyone. So if you all can give me the 411, how we're going to flow.
Yes.
Just in the program, it just had the 2 of us.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
how many presenters?
Yes, this is Dr. Sharon and Pratt Harris. That's it for this evening.
Okay.
And I'll just give you all some background. Again, the doors are open for everyone to come in at 4:20, and then at 4:30 we'll begin presenting. Dr. Sharon will present first.
Okay.
And do you need to, as a matter of fact, we had a little glitch last week. So everyone just pay close attention to their screens. You're not sharing inadvertently. I'm going to open up the share screen. Dr. Sharon, can you share your presentation, or you have access to what you need to share your presentation?
Yes, I sent it.
Perfect. Don't share quite yet. We're going to test it out at like 4:27.
Okay.
But if you want to set it up.
It's already set up.
Oh, perfect. I don't know. I forgot who I was talking to.
That's okay. No problem. We know that it's on the screen right now, so that
Excellent. And then at 5 p.m., I'll chime in and share a little more. I'll be talking about one of the chapters of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who are in place at the conference, and then for the benefit of our students who are learning more about NAPD, I'm going to share what Policing Inside Out is. And then if you all can offer anything about the National Association of Public Defense, that'll be great. And then at 4:30, we can start. So I'll just share quickly. The Policing Inside Out class is a model designed by Dr. Bahia Muhammad at Howard University. Dr. Rodentrader, a Coppin State University faculty, and myself, Dr. Pratt Harris.
I'm not sure how we're going to run this.
Morgan State University. We're located in Baltimore. We actually, oops, this is my mistake. You can unmute yourself. This is my mistake. We actually were certified to teach this class beginning fall of 2018. And Dr. Sharon and Miss Towns, Lori Jones.
Yes.
Oh, yes, great. I muted you mistakenly. I want to make sure I can hear you. So we began teaching fall 2018. This is our 5th cohort of students at Coppin State University.
Can I interrupt for a second? I just gotta work out the tech stuff because I have to be in another room.
Okay.
Is this why?
So hopefully my voice is helping you move it along to see if it's working, right?
No, I need to just kind of talk about the details of how it's gonna run.
Okay, gotcha.
We're gonna do a share screen with Dr. Sharon's PowerPoint
Mhm.
through the Zoom, so your folks can see it too. Is that the goal with that?
Yes,
When is that gonna happen? Is that at the beginning?
4:30, at 4:30.
Right
in
at
the
the
beginning.
beginning. Okay. So can I test that out real quick so I can, how it works on our end? Thanks.
Is this the microphone? Or,
Yeah, whether you want a handheld or whichever one you want.
yeah, let me do the handheld. I think
It was just,
Hang on just a second. I just need to close out some stuff. I've got too many things open.
oh, is that it? No.
if you pull it down again, I saw it. It's at the end. It's right here.
Yeah, but that's not showing in there, so.
Yeah, it's-
Close out some stuff. Just jump into that one. I want that one. Do you know where my other screen went? Do you have that or?
Your other screen? Oh, yeah, no. Patrick has it. You want me to
Patrick has
get
it
it?
now? No, that's all right. I'll figure it out here.
That's. There it is.
Okay, you see it now?
Yep, this is,
Is it all right if we leave that up until we get started?
yeah, that's actually fine because we have a couple minutes left here.
Okay,
So I just want to wrap up what I was sharing so that for the benefit of those who are in the space, Policing Inside Out in Baltimore City began fall 2018. The group that you are seeing on the screen, hopefully they will turn their cameras on where they are available so they can at least see the faces of the students in our class. This is the 5th cohort. So this has been 5 groups of students, community members and law enforcement engaging and discussing police community relationships and, community concerns or problems. So that's the spiel of this class. If someone from NAPD wants to share what NAPD is, that would be great for the students who are sitting in from Baltimore.
Hi, thank you for your patience and us working out all the tech things. I'm sure everybody understands the requirements when you're operating from multiple spaces. So we are joining you, as Dr. Pratt Harris said, live from Montgomery, Alabama, where we are here with a group of public defender professionals, social workers, investigators, and attorneys who work in public defender offices across the country. The National Association for Public Defense supports, trains, and provides advocacy for public defenders. Hold on one second. For public defenders across the country, we have over 35,000 members that we support to provide services, advocacy to communities throughout the country. So that's just a little bit about public NAPD. I'm Lori James Towns, and I serve as the executive director of NAPD. I'm a Morgan alum from the social work program and a Maryland alum from the Maryland School of Social Work, but have done lots of work on the campus of Coppin state as well. So it's good to be here. Thank you, Dr. Pratt Harris, for being with us in this way.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation to participate. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to join everyone in Alabama this week, but I'm so thankful that we are getting together in this way. It was probably a divine moment so our students could experience this. And I just wanted to remind the students that Dr. Lori James Towns is a contributor to the book as well. And Dr. Sharon will probably share a little bit about that. So thank you. You have the mic, Dr. Sharon.
So we can.
Can you hear Dr. Sharon from where she sits?
Yeah, if she can speak, is she talking now?
I'm talking right now. Can you hear me now?
It's a little echo.
I thought so. Maybe talk without the mic and see what happens real quick.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. I'm not sure if this is an issue for anyone else.
I turned off the mic.
Can you hear her better with or without the mic? This is without the mic.
She sounded great to me just now.
Okay, so we'll go like that. What about people in the audience?
If
Can you
folks
hear
in the
me?
audience could just move closer, if you don't mind, because the mic is causing
An echo.
an echo. Yes, thank you.
And let me know when you want me to start.
Oh, go ahead, start. Go ahead, start.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the National Public Association of the Public Defenders, the Racial Justice Conference. I am very pleased to present to you a little overview of a chapter in the book, which is entitled, which I think it's pretty provocative within itself, Why the Police Should Be Trained by Black People. And for a lot of people, they may consider, really? But I think today, when we think about all that we experienced and that we learned by going to the Legacy Museum, it was so thought-provoking about so much history that we did not know and we should have known in reference to African Americans, particularly those who were enslaved, and how similar those experiences are even today. And we're talking nearly 43 years ago, 403 years ago. So my name is Dr. Sharon Jones Eversley. I am a professor and a social epidemiologist at Towson University.
Oh, you got a clicker.
And so before I kind of get into the chapter, which I wrote along with my other colleagues and co-authors of, one is Lori James Towns, we're going to kind of talk about public health a little bit, because that's what my doctorate is in. It's in public health. And a lot of people have a lot of misnomers about public health. Public health is always focusing on the health and wellness of people at their home, in their community, right? Where they work, where they play. And it expands along the lifespan from birth into death. We're into infant mortality, infant morbidity. We're into mortality rate. We're into all of these aspects along the lifespan. In addition to public health, there are many subsectors, and epidemiology happens to be one. Dr. Fauci, because of the epidemic, one with AIDS and then also with COVID-19, made epidemiology kind of popular because he is an epidemiologist. But there are various forms of epidemiology: genetic, environmental, political, economic epidemiology. I happen to focus on social epidemiology and dabble a little bit into legal epidemiology, the criminology of epidemiology, as well as forensic, and there are hundreds of others forms of epidemiology. As you can see from our public health kind of demonstration here, that at the center and the core of what we do, it's not just about equality and justice, but also equity. And that we work closely with the community, we work closely with policy and creating it, as well as particularly with our legal epidemiology arm, actually many times go to court, whether it's local or national, to really promote laws or to acknowledge the absence of laws that are not protecting the due process of individuals. And that's why I think today, particularly as we think about law, ethics, when we think about public defense in particular, people need to know how they can really intersect the lived experiences of their clients by using epidemiology in many ways, working with the community, also really getting that evidence-based statistical assessment regarding situations as well. So I really base my form of social epidemiology, and I say my form, because I focus on W.E.B. Du Bois. He is a renowned international sociologist, and particularly during the progressive era, his books regarding race, not just Black individuals, and particularly with the Philadelphia Negro, was one of the first comprehensive studies that dealt with race. A lot of people just assume just because he was focusing on Blacks in Philadelphia, that was the single core of his study. But he studied over 5,200 individuals from various races and ethnicities. So they were Native American, the indigenous, Asians were included in the study, Blacks and whites were included in the study, Latinx were included in his study. One of the great things about epidemiology in their different forms is that all of us use what you see on the screen, which is called a triangle. And I like to kind of call that triangle the what, the who, the why, and the where. So each triangle is always going to have a host. And that host, if we were talking about COVID, would be the pathogen, would be that infectious disease. It spreads to a vector who then transmits it. There is an environment to where it is going and who is being harmed by it. We also deal with risk, which is harm, but we also deal with protective factors, which help to restore, heal, and people to become healthy. So we just don't deal with illness, but all epidemiologists focus on that triangle. And we talk about that in the chapter due process in the Black community. As if I were Dr. Fauci, I would in that host have COVID, or I could have syphilis. I could have any kind of communicable disease, cardiovascular disease, hypertension. If an infectious disease, I could have AIDS or COVID. Because I deal with social factors relating to health, structural factors, you could have any. I have a chapter of a book that we're focusing in the host is hatred and how it goes through a vector, is transmitted, where it is in the ultimate effect that it has on someone's health or someone's premature death. In this particular article, why W.E.B. Du Bois needs to be known and respected as the father of social epidemiology, we really lay out using the critical race theory regarding how important social epidemiology is. My co-author is Dr. Lorene Dean. She is also a social epidemiologist from Johns Hopkins University. And it's real important that we begin to acknowledge what we've always known for over 100, nearly 125 years now, that health disparities have always, racism has always existed in this country. And it's being particularly impacted by persons of African descent, and particularly Blacks in the United States. So our chapter really deals with looking at two forms of epidemiology: social epidemiology, and we'll talk about this a little bit further in reference to the structural social issues that are impacting someone's health or inciting premature death. We're going to look at legal epidemiology, where you're looking at policies and laws within a targeted community It could be a country. It could be a geographical area, a zip code, a state, or a block. And we're looking at those laws that either help protect the health and prevents premature death, or laws that actually harm these individuals because there's lack of due diligence. So there's lack of policies and laws to protect them, where you can go 3 blocks later or 5 states later, and they have laws that protect individuals from things, and that's legal epidemiology. And the second concept in our chapter is citizen science, which is a participatory aspect that really, one, humanizes community residents as citizens and humans that are fully engaged in the process of working with law enforcement and police in particular. And we're saying if we're going to take this public health approach, our chapter, particularly as it relates to Black citizens and communities, we need to first acknowledge that there is distrust and there's a cause and effect of that. There's a history to that cause and effect. We also talk about the importance of accountability, which is bi-directional. Accountability of the police as well as the citizens within the community. The chapter also really focuses on how do you acknowledge and sustain communal justice, and that bi-directional civility between police and the community. So we have this intersection. Police who have sworn an oath to help, to investigate, to ensure justice and safety for the citizens of this country. But we also have the reality that the pigmentation of brown skin, Black skin, and that's the particular one that I'm focusing on today, is almost viewed as a crime. And there's a history about why. There's a history of why there's such a high number, even though Blacks in this country only represent 12.1% of the population based on 2020 census. It's almost as if my skin color becomes a crime and access and privilege for you to do whatever you want, however you want, regardless of my civil and constitutional rights. So in the book, we acknowledge this history. We acknowledge that crime is rampant. We also acknowledge that there is intense police brutality and police homicide of victims that are Black. And many of those victims of homicide by the hands of police are actually individuals that were unharmed, were unarmed at the time of their surmise and their death. And there has to be a level of accountability. For most people, they don't realize that the 6th leading cause of death of young Black males between the ages of 15 and 24 is being killed not by a gang, not by AIDS, not by an overdose, but being killed by police. That is the 6th leading cause. And that's why we have to not just look at health-related issues from a biological sense, but also intersect that with social structural issues that also incites premature death. We also in this chapter are also focusing on the injustice that is occurring in the community, because who do you trust? A dirty cop or a just cop? When you have history with your family, a community, and friends who have been unjustly accused of committing a crime, jailed, and being innocent, there is this level of distrust, and we cannot ignore that. While acknowledging it, we also have to work towards how do we humanize this experience? How do we use the history, not to hide it, but use it as lessons to learn to move forward? While we are also talking about how people don't expect that police and Black communities will protect them, that they have the true intent. We also in our chapter acknowledge that not all individuals are innocent. Not all police are dirty police, unethical police. And so the reality is that there still has to be a focus on safety, thorough investigations, true justice, and due process. And so we use citizen science and social epidemiology and legal epidemiology in that chapter to take these, I would say, bold steps so that we can begin to acknowledge the distress, but work on sustainable relationships that we can build trust. And so this is just a perspective of the intersection between citizen science, which holds that level of accountability, where you have the laws that looks at those structural issues, those patterns of crime, the patterns of lack of accountability, particularly when you look at some of the rules of police unions and how people are getting away literally with murder, right? And they're being acquitted of crimes that they've committed that are on the police, that are police. And then we look at social factors as well, those social structural factors through the lens of, in addition to citizen science and in addition to legal epidemiology, but also looking through the lens of social epidemiology. And then lastly, we're looking at citizen science, which brings it all together and how communities can work together to be transparent in that particular process. And that is my aspect of the presentation for a chapter of due process within the Black community. I'm going to turn it over to Natasha Pratt-Harris, who will then continue the presentation. I'll stand up here just in case there's a question or two that may relate to the chapter or just comments that may be helpful as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharon Jones-Eversley. Thank you so much. I would like to acknowledge a couple of folks. First of all, we've shared already what this class is or who this class includes. Students from Morgan State University, Coppin State University, and community members and law enforcement. We also have a mother of the movement, Loretta Prater, who has joined us. She wrote the foreword for the book, Why the Police Should Be Trained by Black People. And you know, we're just so thankful for the many contributors to this book. We had more than 30 contributors for this book. And at this time, Dr. Sharon, if you can pause just for a moment or allow some folks to ask you some questions as I set up the presentation on my end. Students in our class, if you have a question, please unmute yourself to ask the question. You may not be able to see what's written in the chat. And again, those who are in the room, if you can ask that question, I will actually pull up my screen at approximately 4:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's 3:55 where you are. So students in the class, please ask your question now. Thank you. And I'll begin the process. So for those who are taking notes, and we will kind of see if we've actually taken the notes, can you describe specifics of what citizen science is and how can members of our class be citizen scientists? Thank you.
Sure. So citizen science is a participatory way of working with community. So often when we work with communities, in many ways, we're pimping them out for publications or for research and for data. This really puts an equal, I would say, equitable perspective. One, because we're humanizing them as not just residents, but citizens with constitutional rights. And we're not just using this as a sidekick, but they are completely involved in the process. So from beginning to end, they would work jointly with all the other components with the same level of respect, the same level of the value of their voice and concern. And this particular analogy that we did in our chapter, we looked at issues, particularly in reference to police brutality, and how we would be able to use citizen science along with the lens of social epidemiology and legal epidemiology. And the core of that would be working with the citizens in a much more humanized perspective. That means if I go to a conference, they go to a conference. If I write a book, they're going to be part author of that book. That there isn't a question in that evaluation that they did not contribute to or endorse in saying that that was okay. That the ownership is a joint ownership and the respect is there too. There are no titles when you're dealing with citizen science. No one would call me Dr. Sharon. They wouldn't call me Dr. Sharon. I wouldn't call someone Detective so-and-so. There are no titles. The issue is what is at hand that the community and the police would be working with together. And that is through the whole spectrum of that particular process. So it's a way of humanizing the experience with both the police as well as with the citizens, not just residents, that sometimes we kind of dilute their true role and the brilliance that they bring. One of the things that I know that as a social epidemiologist, I have content knowledge. And people may call me an expert in my field. That's evidence-based. Not saying that everything that I did is done and researched in a laboratory, but people who live in their community, they have experiential knowledge. And when you bring evidence-based knowledge and experiential knowledge together, there's a much more, I would say, heightened possibility for some solution and improvements really to happen. So that's citizen science. And to be one is to be fully involved in the process.
This is Dr. Rodentrader. I've got a question for you, Dr. Jones-Eversley. And the question has to do with, to your knowledge, are you aware of any police departments across the country that have welcomed the notion of citizen science into their training?
Most of the police are a little more looking at some of the other kind of community participatory types of research, where it's clearly just with, we would call the ivory tower, the university kind of research. Citizen science is very different. But even though police, and this is why we in our chapter recommended, particularly for Black communities, it has been extremely helpful as it relates to environmental justice. If you were to look at some of the southern states like North Carolina, the Black community, who were able to use, for example, citizen science along with legal epidemiology to deal with some of the diseases because of the brown fields and some of the, I would say, just horrific environmental issues of pollution and lead or toxin in their water, things like that. Particularly as it relates to environmental science, it has been amazing because it's not just fixing a problem, but if that problem is not fixed, then legal epidemiology takes that to litigation or a class action suit. That's a bit different. To me, legal epidemiology is what I would say Thurgood Marshall did with Brown versus the Board of Education. It's not just acknowledging disparities and inequities and injustice, but it's also saying this is what needs to be done. And when it's not being done, we need policy, and we are attaching funding to it, and we're attaching, systemic change with it, and we're doing litigation. So you have a lot of individuals, particularly, for example, in North Carolina around environmental justice issues that use both legal epidemiology and citizen science to not just identify an issue, but to correct it. And if it's not corrected in a timely fashion, then there is policy and litigation in place to enforce the justice that needs to be done.
I'd like to just comment, if I could, comment on that question, because I had a unique experience, I think, that combined those two that we're talking about, in that, yes, I am a mother of the movement. My son was killed by police officers, but I also, at the time that happened, I was a dean of a college of health and human services, and criminal justice was one of my departments. So in terms of the evidence-based knowledge, I had a lot of that, but then also as a mother grieving her son's death, I had that experience as well. And as far as whether or not a police department would welcome participation of someone with my background, I would say not really. But what happened, I felt that they needed to have that particular piece as part of their training, and as part of our federal lawsuit, we required that they allow me to do some training in that department. And that was the only reason I think they did it. Otherwise they would not have, but I felt like they needed that. And I wanted to do it with the cadets because I just had a sense based on the fact that I was used to a criminal justice department, and we had cadets as part of that particular department, that they were at a point in their training where there could be some intervention in comparison to so many officers maybe who were not good officers, so to speak, and they've been out there for years and years, and it's almost like nothing is going to make them change. But I felt like we could make a difference. I felt like I could make a difference, and they could actually be in the same room with the mother, and we could interact, and I just felt like that was the thing that they needed. But in terms of, did they welcome me with open arms? I think the cadets did. In fact, I had some who came up and hugged me after my presentation, but as far as that department, I don't think they would have done it if we had not actually put that in that lawsuit, as far as we would not even agree to settle unless they allowed me to come in there and teach those cadets.
We have a history in our country of not welcoming justice towards Black people when it's acknowledged, whether it's policy or whether it's law. So I think if you bring up a really good point in reference to it being mandated, Brown versus the Board of Education was not welcome, but it was the law of the land. And so by choice or force, it still has to be done. And I think that the citizen science, which brings that experiential experience, along with the evidence, which I call the receipt, bringing them both together is a much more profound, I think, platform to say in litigation, we want this part of the restitution, to say as it relates to policy, then you get no federal funds if X, Y, and Z is not being done. But it has to be done in a way where you're bringing that evidence, which I think epidemiology does, as well as the voice of the people and their experiences. So whether they want to welcome with open arms or not, I don't think my mother's going to be the only one who's going to welcome me with open arms, but other people don't have a choice. And so I think if we begin, whether even we're talking about some of these decrees in reference to police departments requiring that type of mandate, it's not an option any longer for us to feel that they're going to welcome. It's just, and it should be part of the policies and the laws, as well as any appropriations that may be assigned or restitution that may be assigned. These things need to begin happening in Black communities, and that's what our chapter really focuses on.
Thank you all so much. And in the chat, I posted the link to Dr. Prater's book. And actually, I'm thankful that we met at the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences conference that was held in Baltimore in 2019, where she shared detail about her experience in her book. And in the beginning forward of this particular book that the students are reading for the Policing Inside Out class, she wrote the foreword to kind of enlighten us or to prepare us as we're going to get through this particular book that addresses quite a few things. Obviously, what Dr. Sharon Jones Eversley is sharing, it is in fact the people's voices that are included in this process, and the people who are the more likely to be impacted negatively by law enforcement are the voices that we are saying are needed to lead police training. We're not saying that's going to solve any of the problems we have in our law enforcement community or the communities in general. We are saying this is a nugget that we believe will be helpful, and the book kind of outlines that. What I'm about to do, just to follow through on our time here, is to segue into what I am sharing, which is on chapter 12 of the book. And chapter 12 is on police contribution to the wrongful conviction of Black people. In this class, this class has always been a safe space. For the 5 cohorts we have taught, this has always been a safe space for us to really talk about our real experiences, not those that we are assuming, not those that we, rather not, really address because it's not popular or it may be uncomfortable. This has always been a safe space to kind of engage and share. And in that way, I think because of who we are, and I'm referencing, all of us, the students, community members, law enforcement, the faculty who lead this class, Dr. Muhammad, who trained us on this, I keep pressing the wrong button, who have trained us on the policing inside out model. Because of who we are, I think we come at this as the citizen scientists that we were born as. I think people need to know they actually have a voice. They've always had a voice. It's just that the world hasn't necessarily asked them for their input. And that's what part of what Dr. Sharon Jones-Eversley was saying. And that I would argue is a part of, I'm gonna minimize this black box that's keep popping up on the screen. That's part of what this book is all about. We are thankful again to be able to talk about some of our contributions during this conference presentation. I'm just sharing on the first slide some of the faces of people who have made contributions to this book. We've actually had Dr. Sharon Jones-Eversley join us in Baltimore, or we're all in Baltimore, for the Policing Inside Out class, along with Dr. Cynthia Bragg, who's a faculty in sociology at Morgan State. One of the contributors to the chapter with Dr. Sharon Jones-Eversley is a faculty at Coppin State, which is Dr. Johnny Rice, the chair of the criminal justice program at Coppin State. So again, this has been I'll call it, there's a word I want to use, and I'll come up with it soon enough, but this has been a process and a moment and I would argue a movement. In the top picture, you'll see Lori Jamestown's, where we did a book signing event this summer. You see one of our contributors, who I will talk about in just a second, Dr. Loretta Prater, and I were able to connect just very recently. This is the first time many of us have been getting together since the pandemic. This picture in the middle is prior to the pandemic. And at the very bottom, there's Dr. Scott, who is the former president of the National Black Caucus Foundation. She also was the president of the Noble National Organization for Black Law Enforcement Executives, who invited myself and my daughter, actually is a contributor to the book, to the Noble Conference this past summer in Orlando, where we shared the copies of the book. Those who are listening in, I will share the links to the book if you'd like to purchase one. But this gentleman here at the top of the screen, his name is Elijah Parker, and he co-authored chapter 12, Police Contributions to Wrongful Conviction of Black People. And one of the things I want to say to everyone who's hearing my voice, I want us to acknowledge that our true lived experience is why we, in many cases, talk with the passion and conviction of really doing all that we can to address some of the problems that we have in our communities and the real problems that we have as it relates to our relationship with law enforcement. This is not made up in our heads. These things actually happened to us. Elijah Parker in the chapter is clearly outlining what his experience was. I met him in 2014 as a person who was recruited to participate in research, but wanted to make his story public. Someone who was 17 when he was charged and then convicted for a crime that he consistently has shared that he did not commit. He did spend 10 years in prison, and it has impacted his life tremendously. Thankfully, this summer, he was released after another bout, because what happens when someone experiences incarceration, including wrongful incarceration, they end up in a cycle that's kind of a thing that goes round and round and round in terms of being in and out of the system. So he's had that experience similar to what I'll talk about relative to the Central Park Five. And in this chapter, I highlight 18, along with Elijah, 18 cases of persons, Black people, who were wrongfully convicted. And it begins with their interaction with law enforcement. So again, the chapter is Police Contribution to the Wrongful Conviction of Black People. And in the chapter, we wanted to be clear that we recognize that it's not just law enforcement that lends to wrongful conviction. It's also all the other things that happen. So in general, there's racial profiling. for Black people. That is real. That is not made up. That is not, something that we feel is happening. We know it's happening. Sometimes there's an attempt to convince us that this is not actually happening. And, this particular race or another race may experience something similar relative to them being pulled over or whatever. No, Black people are racially profiled. Another reality as it relates to wrongful conviction is there may be what's called an eyewitness misidentification. There is the potential for a false confession. And if you watch the Central Park 5 documentaries, there have been a couple of them. That is part of what happened with the Central Park 5. I spoke ahead. Actually, with Central Park 5, it was the false admission. So if you have some babies in a room and they're being interrogated and there's a light flashing on them and they're in there for hours on end, and the job of the prosecutor is to get a conviction, it is possible and likely, and it did happen in the case of Central Park 5, that there's a false admission. There's a social psychological reality as relates to someone saying they did something they did not do, or saying that their peers who were with them did something that they actually did not do. That actually can and did happen. Government misconduct speaks to the potential for a wrongful conviction, improper forensic science, inadequate informants, and official misconduct, which was also highlighted in Central Park 5. I'm acknowledging that because this is the case that many of us are most familiar. Now, I know I am speaking to the choir. The choir includes those who are likely in place at the NAPD conference, because part of what public defenders do is work to allow for persons to have competent representation in the courtroom. That's usually assigned where a person may not be able to afford their own private attorney. When they are studying in law school, there's recognition of the potential for wrongful conviction. Many of our law schools actually have clinics where their focus is on attempting to get persons exonerated for an actual wrongful conviction. So many of our lawyers are familiar with what I'm actually saying. On the next screen, I'm going to begin the story of those who are highlighted in the chapter where we're discussing the wrongful conviction specifically of Black people. These are just some examples, just 18 cases. We have Ed Johnson in Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1906. And part of what happens in the chapter, where they were in fact, and it was found that they were wrongfully convicted, where they were in fact wrongfully convicted, and highlighting how police were involved, and a bold is the text is written in bold in this case. So for the Chad Johnson case, the witness claimed to police of a weapon, a leather strap that was used in a sexual assault of a white female in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And what I'm giving you some briefing, because we're not going to be here all night going through these cases, but we will get some highlights. In the U.S. versus Shipp case of 1906, the Supreme Court ruling found that Sheriff Joseph Shipp and co-defendants were found guilty of contempt of court and spent time in prison for failing to enforce a stay of execution, where this person, while he was convicted of engaging in a sexual assault of a white woman, and they acknowledged that he used a leather strap, that later we found out more details of that and the inaccuracy of that. There was an actual sentence to an execution, and it should have been a stay of execution. He was actually sentenced to death by the U.S. Supreme Court, but granted a stay of execution. A mob captured Johnson from jail and murdered him in a public hanging on the Walnut Street Bridge in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Many of us are familiar with the 1931 Scottsboro case, and also in Tennessee, in Scottsboro, Tennessee, 1931. And 9 Black males ranging age 12 to 19 were involved in a fight and were later wrongfully accused of raping 2 white females. Each was rounded up by the police. This begins the process of a wrongful conviction. Victims actually admitted later on that the supposed gang rape was fabricated when initially told to the police, which followed this led to a drop in the severe punishments for each of the members of the Scottsboro case. Alabama legislature posthumously exonerated the Scottsboro boys. So again, when we talk about the wrongful conviction of Black people, again, what I'm acknowledging is that in many cases, well, not in many cases, there are examples where there was police misconduct or police involvement in the beginnings of a person's being wrongfully convicted. In 1934, Ed Brown, Arthur Ellington, and Henry Shields in Kemper County, Mississippi. The three men, and again, you can read more detail about this upon purchasing the book. The three men were beaten and tortured by the police and made a confession to the police. They made a confession because they were beaten and tortured by the police. And the defining of the Mississippi versus Brown 1936 case was that the forced confession could not be used as evidence. And this is highlighted in this section about the Brown, Ellington, and Shields men. In 1948, we have the Trenton Six out of Trenton, New Jersey. And in this particular case, we have the police arrest was made. A police arrest was made in a case where men were wrongfully arrested and convicted for the murder of a white furniture store owner. The six men did not match the description of the assailant. They did not match the description. You can read more detail about what that means. The Trenton Six signed inconsistent confessions, and you signed those confessions. In this case, they did under coercion by law enforcement. And all of us are, in many cases, more contemporary, like in many recent years, I'll say the past 20 years, Emmett Till's name has resurfaced. There has been several movies, documentaries about him. There's a blockbuster movie about Emmett Till's life. And this is another case, Emmett Till, Amoni, Mississippi, 1955, wrongfully accused by two white men of sexually harassing a white woman. Law enforcement initially spoke out against the murder of Emmett Till, but later began to support the brothers who murdered Emmett Till. So again, the law enforcement's involvement in the continuation of the not finding at least justice in the Emmett Till case. Then we have a case local. Many of us have met Mr. Lomax here in Baltimore in 1967. Mr. Lomax was included in a lineup after a grocery store armed robbery. Although they chased the actual suspect, without apprehending him. And in the Lomax's case, you can read more about it, as a unique case relative to what happens when someone is actually compensated for spending decades behind bars after being wrongfully committed. He spent 39 years in prison. And if you check out what's happening in Annapolis, Maryland, when there's discussion about justice initiatives, you'll see, and you've seen Mr. Lomax. Ulysses Charles, Boston, Massachusetts, 1980. This is where the police involvement occurs. Again, you can read more detail about his case. The evidence in his case was concealed. And according to Charles, the police had a vendetta against him. Again, he was wrongfully convicted, and again, findings are included to share what happened to him. This happened in 1980. Clarence Brantley in Conroe, Texas, in 1980, after he and his white coworker found the body of a rape murder victim, a Texas Ranger said the following, and I quote, "One of you is going to have to hang for this." He specifically told Brantley, since you're and he used the N-word, since you're the N-word, you're elected. So because he was Black, this is similar to what Dr. Sharon Jones Eversley was saying, that is enough to move towards a arrest and later conviction. The next case became a popular case out of the Innocence Project, and this is that of Marvin Anderson, Hanover County, Virginia, of 1982. Anderson, you could read more about his case. He became a chief fire marshal, if I'm not mistaken, in Virginia after having served time. Either way, Anderson was the only person in town known to the local police to live with a white woman, and he was arrested. that's a crime. That was presented as such. And police officers used Anderson's employment identification card for the victim to identify him. Okay, this is a Black man who was a white woman, while other Black and white photos were used to identify other possible suspects. So they used his employment card to identify him, which led to his being charged and convicted of raping a white woman, a white young lady. In 1983, Stanley Rice, out of Chicago, Illinois, he was tortured, and when we talk about the torture that's happened by law enforcement, into a confession by 2 Chicago police officers who also tortured an eyewitness into a false confession. So what you see is the image of the man who spent time behind bars for a crime he did not commit. He was exonerated in 2013. This is the image of him after having spent that time. Glenn Ford, Shreveport, Louisiana, 1984. Police implicated Ford with 2 other suspects, although informants acknowledged 2 others were involved in the robbery and murder, not Ford. Police officers falsely testified during the trial about Ford's confession, and they falsely testified that a witness saw Ford in close proximity to the shop. So one of the things we talk about regarding policing is that police officers have a wide range of discretion. So there's discretion, decisions to make an arrest or not. There's also the potential, in this case, points to that for there to be fraudulent activity regarding what is included in a report, and that's happened in his case. Henry McCollum and Leon Brown, Robeson County, North Carolina, 1984, both falsely confessed under police pressure to the rape and murder of an 11-year-old girl in Robeson County, North Carolina. Authorities withheld evidence that a witness admitted to the murder. So evidence has been withheld by law enforcement regarding trying to acknowledge who actually committed a particular crime. Walter McMillan, Monroeville, Alabama, 1987. What's highlighted here is the police framed Walter McMillan for the murder of a white woman, where there were multiple alibis that he was not at the location where the murder took place. Okay, so you guys may be familiar with this case, and we could talk about why you're familiar with this particular case, given that you are in Alabama at the moment. Then we have Marcus Lyons, DuBage, Illinois, 1987. And again, we had an officer say, "Come on, N-word, your 15 minutes of fame are over." This was after his release from prison in 1991. He called attention to his case while wearing a Navy uniform. But we acknowledged in his case, the evidence was concealed by the police. We all know the Central Park 5 case, New York in 1989, we've already talked about. They were coerced by the police into giving a false confession. In Tulia, Texas, 1999 and 2000, false evidence was presented by a narcotics agent who himself pulled from a personal drug stash, blaming each of the persons who were detained for possessing the drugs. This is 1999 and 2000. As you can see, we're moving on down the pipe, getting closer to more present day wrongful convictions. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 2001, Kareem Choran, police officers were found to fabricate police reports and lie during trial. All the faces that you've seen of persons had been cleared. They were acknowledged as being wrongfully convicted. Last but not least, I'm highlighting a female, Mia Whitaker, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 2005. Drugs that were planted on her by the narcotics unit. One of the narcotics agents was arrested on a sting, after which agents admitted to planting drugs. And there's a whole host of literature and evidence and discussions, especially via the legal community, on wrongful convictions. Race and Wrongful Convictions in the United States is one of the books, one of the publications that's referenced for this particular chapter. But in my concluding statement, my hope is that we are actually enlightened about the realities of the contribution to the wrongful conviction of Black people by law enforcement because of what they did or what they said in the cases here. And when you read chapter 12 of the book, you will be able to, and I'm thinking my camera's on, but it wasn't, you will be able to see what happened in Elijah Parker's case and how law enforcement was involved in processing him and what actually ultimately happened to him. And this is another point I want to make clear for everyone. As we gain more understanding about what's happening with persons who are detained, whether you're detained legally because you committed the offense, or you're detained wrongfully, where it's been confirmed that you did not commit the offense for which you were charged with, the impact is still the same. The psychological impact. Dr. Jones Eversley talked about, the public health aspects of all these things. I often reference some of the realities that Mr. Parker talks about relative to his psychological well-being. There's discussions about general health issues and maintaining their health, if in fact they are released, the stress and strain on the family relative to this issue. But again, if we want to address this is something I learned many years ago from the person who did the first Central Park documentary. This was about 10, 12 years ago. Is that if you want to address the wrongful conviction of people, any person, regardless of race or ethnicity, gender, you can actually listen to the stories and connect with persons who are actually telling you the story about their actual likeliness of being wrongfully convicted, and kind of dig deep to find out as much as you can to address this issue. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please do share. Dr. Trader said for those who are on the Zoom, if you would prefer to post your question in the chat, please do post. If those persons in Alabama would like to pose a question, please do share. We are here to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Gonna see, I know we had an opportunity for the students who are online, but wanted to see if there were any questions or comments from the audience. And there's this big blur, so I really can't tell. If there is, if you could stand up and speak loudly, we would gladly respond to any of your questions. Yes. No problem.
My question is, you mentioned policing and maybe initiative as opposed to that black training. How do you train them? They're being recruited outside the area where black.
Well, I think it should be not really an option, but it should be mandatory. Because there are a lot of police officers.
Excuse me, Dr. Jones Eversley, can you repeat the question so that we can hear it before you answer?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The question was in reference to the title of the book, why police should be trained by Black people. And the question really focused on, but how can you train them when many of them don't know anything really about kind of Black people, or the fact that they've been recruited out of another town where they have no experiences with Black people. So I was beginning to say that it should not be something that's optional. When we look at just the demographics of the impact that police brutality or police involvement with Black communities, they need to understand the history from slave patrol through the entire process, because many of them do not. And so they lead and police with a false narrative that being Black is a crime. You can do anything you want to them because, quote unquote, almost as if Dred Scott, you know what I mean, is still alive today, and our constitutional doesn't go for Black people, whether you're free or slave. So if you have that socially constructed lie of white supremacy and what I call pluralistic ignorance towards the fact that this is a citizen, this is a human being, that you can't plant evidence on someone. When we see these patterns, there's continuing. And the training, because they don't have a clue, nor do they want to, some of them want to know. But one of the things that I know in our chapter, we acknowledge not all police are criminal and unethical. Not all citizens are innocent, right? Either. Crime does occur, but there has to be instead of this pipeline of brutality, of demonizing, dehumanizing Black people as if the pigmentation is a crime and you can do whatever you want to us, as if we were slaves and you can beat and control. There has to be some training, some policy, there has to be shifts that occur. And no one can tell our story like we can tell our story because they don't know.
And I'll add, in one of the chapters, this is chapter 19, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember these chapters like the back of my head at this point. Chapter 19 is on police training by youth, the racially profiled, former gangbangers, and survivors of police brutality. Now, I highlight the survivors of police brutality section. If you are in the police academy, or if you're in service training, and an individual is actually in front of that classroom and they survived the bludgeoning of a law enforcement officer, especially in that jurisdiction, it is now in your face. This is what actually happened to me. And although, there may have even been litigation regarding what happened to me, or obviously there's, a trauma relative to living that experience over and over again, being in your face regarding this is what happened to me, we argue in this chapter is what's necessary or useful to address stop beating us. Especially in the case that's highlighted in chapter 19, the person did nothing to be beaten by law enforcement. Dr. Prater highlighted that when she talked about her losing her child due to a police shooting in Tennessee. By, and again saying, not, there's money that we can get relative to a settlement agreement, but how about we are in the front of the classroom offering the training in the same jurisdiction where our loved one's life was taken. The persons who are the most impacted by these realities are the people who we argue should be in front of the room. And this title can go everywhere regarding all sorts of things, like why social workers should be trained by Black people, while medical professionals should be trained by Black people. And it can go on and on and on. But we're talking about law enforcement and what we know in our respective disciplines regarding, addressing some of those needs. I'm not sure if Dr. Prater wanted to share something in addition.
Yeah, I did. Well, for clarification, my son wasn't shot. He died from positional asphyxia, very much like George Floyd, and there were 4 police officers involved, and he was unarmed. And it was so much similarities to his death and George Floyd's. But, going back to how people stereotype Black people, one of the things I think that surprised people when I would show up to do these presentations and everything, and I come in as Dr. Loretta Prater, and then they're like, oh, and it's almost like, the whole tone and just sort of changes. And that shouldn't be the case, because I was coming in as a mother. And I said, to them, you all have mothers, and I'm sure if you were treated like my son was, your mother would feel the same way that I'm feeling. So I wanted them to see me as another Black person, as just an individual, and not necessarily for them to try to give me special treatment because I had a doctor in front of my name. But, going back to whether or not they would have allowed it, they would not have allowed it. And I had said, I will continue. I don't even live in Chattanooga, Tennessee anymore. Didn't live there then, but I will continue to come down there and do these trainings because I felt they were really necessary. But as soon as the new police chief came in, he shut it down. And whenever I would visit Chattanooga and people would see me and they would say, why'd you stop doing that training? I said, because they won't let me. So they would never let me do any more of those trainings after a new police chief came in.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prater. I'm going to just say one quick thing. My apologies for misspeaking. Yes, Dr. Prater's story is very specific. As I mentioned, I posted her book link in the chat. It's called Excessive Use of Force, One Mother's Struggle Against Police Brutality. And I would encourage you all to take a look at that, especially as many of us are involved in addressing these issues for the better of all people. So Dr. Rodentrader, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pratt Harris. I'd just like to say thank you, Dr. Jones Eversley, and everyone in Alabama for affording us the opportunity to be a part of the National Association of Public Defenders Conference. We trust that the information that our class has received has been edifying. I believe we've accomplished the goal. The goal, and just for clarity, is not to browbeat to law enforcement. We are actually supporters of law enforcement, but we're also supporters of humanity. And I believe Dr. Prater's most recent comments about, the letters on our names, whether it's officer, sergeant, lieutenant, doctor, colonel, whatever those titles, the bottom line is that what binds us is that it's our humanity, and we should all have justice. We should all be treated fairly. And I know that's a bit utopic, but we should have the expectation for that. And as Dr. Jones Eversley said, the pigmentation of my skin should not be an indictment of who I am. The narrative about Black people and poor people are the ones who commit crime. It's a fallacy, and our criminology textbooks have just been perpetuating that fallacy with a blind eye to all those other persons who commit crime. It's part of our humanity and human nature. We will violate societal norms. We will go against rules, but to just put a blanket bullseye on persons who are Black or brown is problematic, and to have law enforcement take that narrative to heart in the way that they enforce the law are problematic. And so for the citizenry, it's important for them to know the historical underpinnings, to know these cases. It's important for you as a citizen to learn about your own rights relative to the law, and to also adhere to what are the expectations of you as a citizen relative to law enforcement. It is my hope that law enforcement will have trainings like this. Why the police should be trained by Black people is necessary, because in the training at the academies, they are not getting a full picture. And in our society, we need a full picture. And this society will have more pigmentation that needs to be dealt with in a more pro-social and positive way. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us virtually. We appreciate you and appreciate all your work.
And I apologize. Hello, it's Lori James Monroe. A pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's so good to see you. Thank you so much.
Doc, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's a name that people don't forget. It's fine. Thank you so much for this collaboration. And, hopefully again, next year, you will be here with us in person in Alabama. We need your energy. We need your expertise with us here in this state of Alabama. But we thank you, and the audience here, I'm sure, has gotten so much out of this. And we'll make sure that we have the link to the book in the schedule app, so that if folks want to order the book, we'll make sure that they're able to do that. And thank you for this collaboration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good evening.
All right, good evening. For the students, we are still here till, what time of day is it? Oh, we're here till 6 o'clock. I forgot. So any comments, questions that you didn't get a chance to ask? Any thoughts about what you're going to do in terms of your reflection? Anything. And then we're going to talk again about November 8th and November 15th.
Wow, you guys have gone quiet.
Well, the good news is we'll be together in person next Tuesday at the University of Baltimore Police Training Center. We will share the instructions on where you're going at the building. We'll remind those about what we have in terms of any transportation option. Yeah, we'll be in person. Those students there's one student who has exclusively joined us on Zoom because she had to. we're going to come up with an alternative for you because we won't be able to do Zoom. We will not be able to do Zoom. I thought we could at the police training center. So those who are going to be able to come in person can experience that in person, but we can't do Zoom for the police training center. Someone asked a question about getting a recording for us at the museum. We're going to have pictures. I know we're going to take a lot of pictures. We may record some things, but we will not be on Zoom either on the 15th of November. It is encouraged, especially if you have not visited the museum, that you do make plans to visit. If you have visited, considering what you've experienced in this class, it would be great for you to go again so you can kind of think about how the class kind of complements some of the things that are discussed at the museum, or the museum complements, sorry, some of the things that are discussed in the class.
And also, for next week's class at the police training facility at UB, if you would consider 2 questions that you would like to ask, given the opportunity. In previous years, we've been able to see a cadet class. We've had the opportunity to speak to a colonel. We talked with somebody who does training. So come prepared to have such opportunities. I know it's a new facility. I've not been to that particular facility. I'm very much accustomed to the Park Heights one, where we went 2 or 3 times already. But I would like for you to come with some specific questions. You know, you've got law enforcement officers in front of you, and they're talking a lot. It's a training facility, so there will be a lot of officers. Ask your questions. So come with 2 very good sound questions that you've always wanted to ask, and hope you'll get the opportunity to get answers. So,
and I'll make sure that's a part of the reflection. The questions will be ready to.
All right.
Yep.
Will the time at the academy still be the same time? It's like 5:30.
Yep. So we are arriving at 5:30, departing by no later than 8 o'clock. Any other questions or comments? Let me just go around. Ash, you're good. Taya, Lola, I know you asked a question earlier. Sydney, did you understand the instructions?
Yes, I'm good.
Okay. We usually hear something from Merlene and Paul, Tanaya Williams, Justin Steers.
I'm here willing to ask something, but I did put up my hand twice, but you didn't see.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah.
He asked
I was
oh
Lord, I hope I didn't lose my train of thought. The presenter said something in the beginning. Let me see if I can knock my brain to 15 back now. Mm-hmm. She said something about 400 years ago. If she can repeat that, maybe to trigger me back.
Okay.
In her starting her conversation, she said something about 400 years ago.
I know she was referencing slavery in the U.S. 1619, and so she said 403 years ago, persons of color, Black people, were brought to the Western world to be enslaved. And then she also talked about the slave patrols and how that's the beginning of policing of Black people, just to be clear.
Right. So what I'm saying, what I'm picking up from her early presentation was that what we're experiencing today is coming from back then. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Suppose I tell you that this morning, usually in the mornings, I read a reflection on something in history or whatever. And the article was a biblical article, but it spoke of George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. It's like they were reflecting from then that this type of living was going to escalate and that America needed help. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be hard for America to get the help. They have to look up above, so to speak. Of course, I didn't know that the 3 heroines were going to come into place.
Wow.
Dr. Natasha Pratt, Dr. Trader, and Dr. What's her name?
Dr. Sharon Jones Eversley. Mm-hmm.
The Muslim name, I keep forgetting her.
Dr. Muhammad.
Dr. Muhammad.
Right. My 3 heroines. I cannot forget the names. But I'm telling you, it's like he said that this country is gonna need help. And this was just this morning reflection that I was reading my article. And I heard the presenter now, and she spoke to it. So you could feel the social tension, the social whatever mix up, everything. I don't know how to say it right now because I was hot when I put up my hand and she did call to me. Dr. Natasha Pratt, you're gonna lose the job. I've not seen my hand when I wanted to. But what I'm saying,
as you guys don't know, I was driving at one point during the presentation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that George Washington saw this coming in the future. Benjamin Franklin saw this, and they said, you know what? America is going to need help from heaven to stop this from spreading. And then when I look at what you presented, just spoke to the heart of it all. And it's like it won't stop. The blacks training whites, I don't see it happening because of this. I don't see it happening. And just think about how they were against Obama being a black man running the country. They're not going to want blacks training police officers. But what I can tell you, what could be a start in helping the situation, you know, like when the police goes out on their strips, it's usually two, right? Not one, two. From today onwards, no two white policemen should be seen in a car, a white and a black. The workforce should put it where a white and a black police work at all times. That is one of the beginning that we could have to start something in a positive way. And I didn't get her name properly, but the social report, the presenter touched me. She touched me. And I've been thinking on those lines too. But I don't know how much I can chat on your class. But sometimes I just condense my thoughts.
That was great. It gave us an opportunity to share. I just want to pop in real quick. I know Dr. Trader has something to say. So you talked about the black officer and the white officer. I'll give you two comments. Number one, in chapter 4 of the book, Black Cops as Police Trainers Help Without Harm. One of the things that, and you know, Dr. DeLacy Davis, who spoke last week, Dr. Tyrone Powers, who was on the panel last week, were on. And in this chapter, they're very clear that it should be the right black cops, because there's a potential that someone could, I just read this quote the other day, and guys, excuse me if you may or may not get what I'm saying, but the quote was, I'm paraphrasing actually, the quote was, how do we relinquish white supremacy when some people of color continue to support it? So what the argument is in this chapter is that the right black cops who are well informed about these issues should be in those spaces, like to be coupled up with a white officer. Another point I want to make is that there was a student at Morgan, retired law enforcement professional. He talked about exactly what you're saying regarding him being a black officer and him having a white partner. And he said at the beginning of his the white officer's career, he said that he was clear, I don't like black people. They're thugs, the way they dress, the way they wear their hair, the music that they play. And he said, but you're cool. This officer that he was with is okay. But what did happen over the course of that journey for that officer is that white officer became one of the most loved, lauded, and respected officers in the community. And he changed his mind regarding black people because he was positioned in a predominantly black community. And he fell in love with the children. He was the one who did the Christmas gifts.
That's right.
Right. And so that engaging, so that's what we're saying. When you have us in front of the classroom, or you have us connecting, you're gonna fall in love with us. You know, if you see any image, for example, or engage with people over time, you're gonna like them. It's gonna be okay. And that's part of what Marlene is saying, I'm sure. She says the black and white officer together.
That's right.
Well, Marlene, I have to sort of just to have a word of caution here. Constitutionally, we can't just think in black and white. It's not a dichotomy. The United States, like our own nation, out of many one people, but the Constitution here, if we are very rigid in this, well, we need a white officer with a black person, the Asian person is gonna say, well, what about the officer who's Asian? And what about the Latinx officer? And then what about, this officer? And so it shouldn't be about nationality or country of origin. It should be an ethos that law enforcement agencies have, that regardless of the hue or the country of origin of its officers, that they're operating on a philosophy of persons are innocent until proven guilty. Now, I understand that's the court's role, but in terms of even apprehension, how you apprehend, how you go into a scene, do you go with your biases? Being objective rather than subjective, understanding the nuances, the cultural aspects and dynamics of a community. The question has been asked, well, why did Freddie Gray run? Well, Freddie Gray ran because in West Baltimore, the presence of law enforcement officers, the fact that he had been pulled up on, or they pulled up on him several times or whatever, he's suspicious. When you're suspicious of something, naturally your mind tells you flight. It's fight or flight. Freddie Gray may not have wanted to fight with the officers because he understood the consequence. So he decided I would rely on running from the officer. So all of those things are necessary. And, as much as Marlene, I'm so sorry that you don't think that we can make a dent, and you may be very right. And, my colleagues probably agree with you. Nonetheless, I think I said this in 2 classes ago. I mentioned the Talmud. If you can reach one person, it's that each one reach one ideology, then even if that is just considered to be tantamount to a drop of water in the ocean, maybe the one that comes to shore might be very well the one that it makes a difference for. And we have seen on the side of students in this class in particular, who have come in very much assured that we don't like police, we don't want anything to do with them, we have no interest. And then we find out 2 years later that they themselves are law enforcement. Just last week, Mr. English popped in from our 2020 class, our first online class in the midst of COVID. And Mr. English, who has law enforcement in his family, could not have been more anti-law enforcement. Said it unapologetically. He had his lived experiences on the west side of Baltimore. He was very clear, but when you heard him with your own voice, and we've got it on tape, Mr. English is now possibly going to be in the forensics department within law enforcement. We've seen it happen. We've also seen law enforcement officers in this very class that have said, we're looking at things a little differently. The issue with the class is that we don't have top brass, for example, who have the power to change policies. I mean, Dr. Jones Eversley's presentation about citizen science and all of that, that needs to be a part of the citizen accountability board and the civilian review boards. That needs to be placed as part of what goes on. We're not just trying to say that officers have issues, community has issues. Dr. Pratt Harris, you alluded to it. Not all Black people are law-abiding. Not all people are law-abiding. There are people who do not respect or react properly to law enforcement when they encounter them, and that is a problem. An officer has to go home at the end of the day and has a family waiting for him or her, to come home. So they are people. So if we go back to the humanity aspect, why the Black people should train the police is simply looking at the atrocities that have occurred to Black people at the hands of law enforcement. Let's just say 18 of them that Dr. Pratt Harris alluded to. And then looking at the citizen science and looking at this issue from a health or public health standpoint. If we were to do that, and if in the academy, we go next week, they are training their officers to more than just how to shoot your gun, how to apprehend. Now they're moving into having scenario type training to encompass some of these situations. If we were to have this wraparound approach, then perhaps we could make a dent. So
yes, and I will offer something really quickly. So
I agree, Dr. Trader, I agree fully. I toss police out, but I love police. I have police in high ranking, but I still put them in their place.
Oh, right. Come on now. But really quick, I just want to share this. University of Maryland, I'm a Black Turk. I graduated from University of Maryland. And I will tell you this, it's intentional at the University of Maryland to pair up roommates and make sure it's diverse. And Maryland is a state institution, but when it came to housing, you weren't necessarily paired up with someone of your same race or ethnicity. So that's something that's possible, I think. But again, it has to be like, maybe policy, because I know there'll be a lot of pushback. Mr. Coley.
Oh, hey, Natasha and Dr. Trader, good evening. My thing, I did want to talk to Dr. Sharon. I want to ask her some as far as citizen science and also the public health hazard. Now, it might be a little bit outside the field apart from police. But what I want to ask her, does the fireman also involved in this case right here as far as dealing with the fireman? Because I was looking at a case today where in Flint, Michigan, there was 2 young boys that was in a house where the fireman went. I think it happened on Memorial Day. And the white police went inside of there and give clear that they didn't see nobody inside of there. And 6 minutes after, 2 black firefighters went in there and found the 2 young boys' body laying in a room, one by the bed, and to the council, and so now it's taken it to the court. The fire commission recommend that these 2 guys be fired from the fire brigade. And also the mayor of the county already take it upon himself and deny this, so they're still working. So what I'm asking, what I want to ask Dr. Sharon, would this, as far as the civil science and also public health, but also fire personnel will involve inside of these cases where they could be prosecuted and bring to justice for denying 2 black children from their life when they went there to do their public service as helping them out the fire. That's what I want to ask her.
I'm sure that the baseline idea is that the citizen science idea can be applied in any area.
Okay.
And so then, I'm sure she could write, because she publishes often, and she would, be able to address that if she were to write for a publication that addressed first responders. So I think that would be useful there. Actually, but I'll definitely share that you all had questions, and unfortunately we didn't see your hand. My apologies.
No, I did ask first, but you was on a roll, so I couldn't, I know I couldn't get in at the time.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But I did want to ask her, with case like this, what would they do to case like this? I mean, because this should be something where these guys should be prosecuted, because that's the life they take. They swore to protect.
That's
and
right.
They didn't protect, so I want to ask her, what would you do with these 2 firefighters? They're still in duty. I think they should be in jail right now, to be honest.
Wow. I haven't heard that case. I'm gonna definitely look into that.
It's in Memorial Day in Flint, Michigan.
Wow.
Look it up.
And we all know about Flint, so it could be why the people of Flint should train members of the executive team. It's a whole lot of things we know happen in Flint, Michigan.
I know.
Do you have any other questions or comments? And I want to share something else with you all, just to wrap up, not to wrap up, this is my last comment. I didn't get a chance to talk about this case at length, and I wasn't talking about any cases at length because I know we all are reading the book. So you're getting the detail there. But this case involving Walter McMillian Monroeville, if any of us have seen the Just Mercy movie, this is the person that the Just Mercy movie was about. Jamie Foxx was the He's played the role of Walter McMillian, and the lawyer Brian Stevenson was played by, you guys can tell me his name. He's in Black Panther. And he's also you guys know his name. He was dating
Michael B. Jordan.
Michael B.
He
Jordan.
died.
Right?
Yeah,
And
he
so,
died, didn't he?
Walter McMillian.
Yeah, I thought the guy that playing
Oh
Black
no,
Panther.
No, but Michael B. Jordan actually played
Okay.
the lawyer in this movie called Just Mercy, which came out in 2020, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And what I want to share is that the folks who are in Alabama are there with Brian Stevenson. This is why the conference is held in Alabama. Brian Stevenson is the lawyer who represented Walter McMillian, and he had established the Equal Justice Institute, which addresses the wrongful conviction, oftentimes of Black people. And he also took the people who were in Alabama to on a tour to the Legacy Museum. And we had a conversation about the folks who were visiting the Legacy Museum and how part of that experience will be as gripping or more gripping than what some of us will experience when we visit the African American Museum of History and Culture in Washington, D.C., because it's really telling the story about the lives of people who were wrongfully convicted and beyond, including babies. So that is what I wanted to piggyback on from earlier. So I'm done talking. Dr. Trader, you want to take us home, and then we're done in 4 minutes.
All right, I'm only going to use one. Thank you all so very much. I wish you a wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of the week. The forecast in Baltimore is looking lovely, almost summer-like. Get out, listen to the birds that have not yet gone south. Check out the skies at night, look for some stars. Live, love, laugh. Be happy. We have one life to live. Make it good.
Yes.
See you next
Take
week.
care. Enjoy Jamaica. It's probably warmer. Take care.
Oh, yes. You guys in Jamaica? One love. One
Okay,
love.
we will. One love and bless up.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay.